It is a remarkable opportunity for us to have two former congressmen speak on this topic of immediate interest, and I want to make sure that I express my gratitude to the United States Consulate General for their provision of these talking heads before us, and to the Congress to Campus program that they are a part of, which I think is a marvelous idea, and I'm delighted we were able to be part of that. I could tell you a whole lot about each of these two distinguished gentlemen, and I won't because you came to hear them rather than me, but I want to give you just a sense of the background of each of them. The first person you will hear from is Steve Kuykendall, a former congressman from California. While in Congress, he served on the Armed Services, Science, and Transportation and Infrastructure committees. But he wasn't always a congressman. He was a Marine Corps lieutenant. In Canada, we would say lieutenant, during the Vietnam War. After the war, he became a businessman, working in the commercial and mortgage banking field. He became a counselor and then mayor of a city in California and served 2 terms in the California State Assembly. Our second speaker, and I'm not sure if I mentioned, Steve is a Republican. Our second speaker, Martin Lancaster, is a Democrat. He was born on a tobacco farm in North Carolina. He too served in the Vietnam War as a judge advocate in the Navy and continued as an active reservist for many years after that. Where Steve was a businessman, one of the 2 great feeder occupations into politics, Martin was a lawyer, the other great feeder profession. He served in the North Carolina House of Representatives and then in Congress. While in Congress, he served on the Armed Services, Small Business, Agriculture, and Merchant Marine and Fisheries committees. After his time, well, I guess even while still in the House, he represented the House of Representatives for 6 years at the Chemical Weapons Convention negotiations in Geneva, and was active on the Congressional Study Group on Germany and the North Atlantic Assembly. After leaving Congress, he served as the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works, where he was primarily responsible for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And to give him academic roots as well, he was the president of the North Carolina Community College system. I am looking forward, as you all are, to what they have to say. And first of all, I'll call on Steve Kuykendall.
Boy, you all know so much about us that if you anything you didn't want to know or you want to find out, just Google our names and look at Wikipedia, and most of it will be accurate. And if it's not, ask about it. In this day and age, and I know I've done these other times where I have been in a room where somebody's checking the background right there on their screen while we're talking, coming up with a question to ask. I'm the junior member of this team. That's the reason he's having me go first. He does this in each of our meetings, I've learned. And there wasn't any debate about that. It was just, Steve, you'll be good. Go first. Thank you very much, Martin. But we normally come to these groups and we talk to college campuses. We talk about college and Congress and what congressmen do. Well, that's not quite as topical with you all these days as there's this election we've got coming up. And that's what's got everyone's attention focused. And there's a 435 congressmen up for election in that same election. You may not be aware of that. And a third of the Senate is too. But it's the presidential part that everyone's paying attention to. It's been a much more entertaining presidential election cycle than many people have expected when we started this year and a half ago. We're now down to the final 2. So I thought I'd try to put that a little in context for you. In the United States, interesting elections usually come about for 3 or 4 reasons. One is we could have some great tragedy. Most obvious of those is our Civil War, 1860. We can have bad economy be an issue. Most obvious of those are 1932 when we had the Great Depression and 2008 when we had the Second Great Depression. We've also had weird endings. 2000 is a good example of that. We had a guy elected who didn't have all the votes and got settled by the court. Turned out he got reelected though. So he must have been okay in the process. That's one of those weird endings. Now for this one, the other thing that's usually historically accurate is when we have a weird election, we are either coming out of hard times or we're headed for hard times. And so I don't know whether we're coming out of hard times right now or whether we're headed to hard times, but this is definitely a weird election. And when I say a weird election, it's weird because you've got two candidates that are more unpopular than has ever been recorded in our history of presidential candidates. As long as they've been keeping records, we haven't had two candidates, both the Republican and the Democrat, be as high, have as high a negatives as these two candidates do. It's unusual that that would be the successful candidates going through the primary process. Normally that's what willows away, is winnowed away by the process. But in this case, they both succeeded to become that final two. So you've got two unpopular candidates, each party, and in each party there's a hard 20% that don't like anybody in the election. And then each candidate has got a hard number within their party that'll go with them, but it's by no means a large percentage. And then they've got this huge category of voters that are, I'm voting against the other guy, whether or the girl. You know. And what to me I think is a little interesting is lost in all this is, folks, there's a 50-50 chance we'll have the first woman president in American history. Go figure. We'll just throw that in for the weird factor as well. Had never happened before, following the first African American we've ever had. We got some real historical significance that could come about by who turns out in this election. So many people want to know, well, where do you stand on this? And I'll make the speech short and simple. I don't think Trump is worth the powder to blow him up, and I have no interest in voting for him, and I absolutely cannot stand Hillary Clinton. So I'm one of these guys that's really struggling right now. I'm in that 20%, that don't know. You got a pretty good libertarian, but he's a little weak in some areas too, but I don't have.
know where Aleppo is.
Yeah, I think he knew where it was. He didn't know what the acronym was. But all that aside, and we've got a nice lady, Jill Stein, on the Green Party, and those two are peeling off about 15-20% of the vote right now between the two of them. So what's going to happen? Well, we'll all know on November the 9th, we think. And if we don't know on November the 9th, it'll be settled up when the election's finally decided a few weeks later after whatever happens in the counting of the votes. What I also want you to keep in mind is in the United States, we're a country that's driven by our Constitution, and all this excitement is about one branch of our government. It's the executive branch. Well, that's not even the first branch that's mentioned in this Constitution. I mean, the first branch is the legislative branch, the one we served in. It's the only branch that's directly elected by our population. They're all going up for election this time, too. Presidents are indirectly elected, and they're the next branch. And then we also have this other branch called the courts, Supreme Court. And it's amazing how many decisions they've made that change your life here recently as well. So you put those three together, we have three branches of government. And the most exciting and interesting one right now is this presidential election, of which we don't know the outcome of. However, after that election, they will have to be able to succeed with a Congress that they can't control because they're independently elected, and with a court they can't control because they're independently selected over generations. And So I think one of the things that you always need to keep in mind when we have an election, the thing you'll fall back on after the election is how this Constitution works between those branches. And you'll see that nothing happens very fast and without just literally unanimous consent for it to happen. I don't see that on anybody's platter today. And it will require the ability to build a consensus about something. Right now, the only consensus we seem to have is that more people dislike the candidates than like them, and we got more people angry. And they're angry whether they're Bernie Sanders supporters or they're Trump supporters. They're just angry. They're mad. They don't like the way things are going. They don't like the way their life is turning out, and they're 40 years old or 50 years old, and they think they've been screwed, whether they're Republican or Democrat. And that piece of the population is one that is going to have to be dealt with in this coming post-election cycle. The fact that they're mad can have policy implications. The fact we're all, don't like the candidates, that doesn't have policy implication. That's just human nature. So keep that in mind as we move forward into these elections. They'll be entertaining. It's certainly, having Donald Trump on the Republican Party campaign trail did more for generating voter interest, both in our party and in the Democrats in some cases. And it did great numbers we never had the kind of turnouts for party debates as we had after he joined the fight. And so even if you didn't, I didn't think he would be the ultimate survivor, but I sure liked the fact that whenever he first got in the race, you had a whole lot of people watching, and they could see the other 10 or 15 people in the race just by the fact they were on the floor with him. And that helped. So we're in a real weird period of time. Now, is it going to be that we've come out of good times and we're going into bad times? I don't think it's going to fit any of these other ones. We're not looking at a tragedy, I don't think, and we're not looking at an economic collapse necessarily. But what's it going to be? And I'll leave it at that, and we'll talk about questions, because I really want you to kind of see the scope of this and the fact that you've got two people here that have got a little road wear on us from campaigns, but we've also seen that from the perspective of decades worth of political activity. And so maybe this level of excitement may be just that. It's exciting because it's like a TV reality show. And when it's over with, then we'll get back to reality and the pragmatism of our country, where we have, between the economic system we have and the pragmatic reality of how our people function, it will no longer be quite as flashpoint. I'll stop there and let my sidekick here give his 2 cents worth.
This is a weird election. Certainly the weirdest in my memory, and I've been at this a long time. And it's going to be very difficult to predict the outcome of the election, and more importantly, it's very difficult to predict what's going to happen for which one of these is elected president, because, as Steve said, they both are incredibly unpopular. And so they will start out probably without the honeymoon that most new presidents have, which with Obama led to passage of health care, and other presidents have been able to do the most of their agenda at the beginning of their term, because what they do tends to make them less popular as they go along instead of more popular, and so they're unable to accomplish as much the longer they serve. And I'm not sure either of these will go into the White House with a level of support that will allow them to do much of anything. Plus, furthermore, as Steve indicated, presidents have very little ability to significantly affect the agenda once they're in. They are promising all sorts of things now. They're predicting all sorts of things now. But the fact of the matter is, they will not be able to accomplish much of anything because of this balance of power. Even within their party. It's hard for me to imagine that a lot of things that Trump has promised will happen. Very clearly, the president of Mexico has made clear that he's not going to pay for a wall to be built, but he continues to talk about it, even having the president of Mexico tell him that to his face. My guess is that Hillary is not going to be able to modify health care to make it the Canadian system, where everybody is covered and covered through a government paid for system. The system we have now is far from universal, though it's the most people insured in the history of our country. But she would like to have a single pay health care system, something that she fought for her husband when Bill was president. And neither of them is going to be able to do that because of the significant opposition in both cases in the Congress, to say nothing of the possibility that the courts would declare whatever they achieved unconstitutional. So that's something that you always have to contend with, and is not likely to happen. So a lot of people are all excited that if Hillary's elected, there won't ever be any more coal mined or sold in the United States, because she, for various reasons, has at least made coal partisans believe that if she's elected, they will suffer dramatically in their coal-producing communities. And people get all excited about some of the crazy things that Trump has proposed that aren't going to happen either. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out after the election. But you may rest assured that the more extreme proposals that both of these candidates have proposed are not going to happen. And then we will have to see where it comes down in between, because a lot of Democrats do not support what Hillary is proposing, even though they'll vote for, and a lot of people don't support what Trump is proposing if they can keep up with his latest version, because he changes his position on issues almost as often as he changes his underwear. It's going to be interesting to see which of his positions he espouses tonight on the debate, and then what positions he will take in the next debate, and then in the third debate, because that is one of the weirdest things about this election, that he continues to propose something different almost every day, and is not likely to be able to get any of them through. But it will be entertaining. How many of you are going to watch the debate tonight? Yeah, I think most people will. I think this will be, that it's predicted that this will be have the most people watching the debate tonight than in any previous television broadcast in the history of television, because not only does it have significant interest in the United States, but with others as well, other countries as well. And of course, because you are our nearest neighbor and our strongest friend, you have great interest. Mexico will have interest. The The United Kingdom will have interest because, of course, they're going through their own trauma now with Brexit. And so it's going to be an interesting time to watch the outcome of the election and its impact on other countries. I think one area of great concern is in the area of trade. Hillary has been a free trader as long as I've known her, and I have known her and Bill since they were governor and first lady of Arkansas, and they have always supported free trade, of course. Bill Clinton's hallmark in trade was NAFTA, and so for her now to be expressing concern about the trade agreement negotiated for the Pacific Rim countries in the United States is something new for her. She did that, in my opinion, because of Bernie Sanders, and for that matter, Trump, all of whom have been anti-free trade. But my guess is if she's elected, she has given herself enough wiggle room that she will come out ultimately with suggesting minor changes to that treaty and trying to get it passed. But trade will very clearly be an issue of some significance in the election and as well as the first few years of the new president's nomination. To turn back trade agreements that have been in place for a long time, such as NAFTA, something that Trump has occasionally proposed and at other times opposed, is going to be interesting to see. But very clearly, you would say that he is protectionist and anti-free trade, and that Hillary has traditionally been very much for free trade, and just going to see how that plays out. I'm sure that will be one of the questions asked tonight, and how the answer is going to be something that is hard to know.